Okay, let's try another example. Let's say we want to solve this. 3x squared plus x minus 8 is equal to 0. Okay, so I want to complete the square. I want something of the form x squared plus bx. I have a 3x squared instead of an x squared, but I don't worry because these two sides are equal. So I know that if I take 1/3 of this quantity, it's going to be equal to 1/3 of this quantity because both quantities were the same to begin with. So that tells me that x squared plus 1/3 x minus 8/3 is equal to 0 times 1/3, which is just 0. Now, if I want to complete the square, I need to find b over 2, which happens to be 1/3 over 2, or half of 1/3 is 1/6. 1/3 times 1/2, multiply the denominators. b over 2 squared is going to be 1/36. So, what am I going to get? Well, I add 1/36 and subtract 1/36. And then when I group these three terms, I always get x plus b over 2 squared. So that's x plus 1/6 squared. Now over here, let me move everything over to the right. I get 1 over 36 plus 8/3. Well, I want to find a common denominator. 36 happens to be 3 times 12. So I just multiply 8/3 times 12 over 12. Here we're using our other one trick, right? There's only really two tricks. You can add 0 and multiply by 1. We use these tricks all the time. So I get 1/36, and then this is going to be plus 8 times 12, so that's 12, 24, 48, 96. So 96 over 36, I get this. Now at this point, I just use my rule for radicals, and I get minus 1/6 plus or minus root 97 over 6. How did I do this last step? Well, the root of a over b is the root of a over the root of b, so I get that for my answer. If I had a slightly different problem, let's say I had the same thing as before, but let's say I was adding 8. So then at the first step, I multiply both sides by 1/3. And now I do the same thing. I still get b over 2 is 1/6, just like before. And b over 2 squared is 1/36. But now what happens? Well, I have x plus 1/6 squared is equal to, well, when I move this over, I get 1/36 minus 8/3. That's going to be 1/36 minus 96 over 36. Minus 95 over 36. You see, my problem here is now that if I try to use my trick, I get that x plus 1/6 equals plus or minus the root of a negative number. As a matter of fact, I can tell you for sure now that this equation has no solutions. How do I know that? Well, because if this is true up here, then this is true right here. And if this right here is true, that means I have a non-negative number, because this is squared, equal to a negative number. And that can't happen. So this one has no solution, but how did we see it? Well, we saw it by completing the square.